some women will say, well, you're saying women are sexist? Yeah, sometimes you are, and sometimes we're not. And sometimes you're hurt by sexism, but so are we. And another thing that can get you going onto an energetic conversation is to say, men aren't perfect, but we're great. Women are great, but they're not perfect.
All right, Jack. So your name is Jack, and you're with Male Friendly Media. Can you tell me a little bit about Male Friendly Media?
Well, it's really just me. Uh, it's a one-man operation. But I started a radio show back in 1982. Well, it went on the air first in 83, but I started working on it in 82. And the purpose of it was just to try to do a better job of communicating the male point of view on gender issues. I can tell you the story that led up to me feeling the need for that. You want to hear that real quick?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I was on a co-ed softball team in the 80s, and it was, a ton of fun, ton of fun. Every Tuesday we would play a game, and then Tuesday evening, and then after the games we'd go out for drinks and dancing and a little food. And 2 weeks in a row, two different female teammates had me sitting at a table with them, and they were both telling me tales of woe about their boyfriends. And they both independently, separately, a week apart, ended their stories by saying something very much to the effect of, and so he's a real jerk, don't you think? And all I could do both times was to say, well, maybe he's a jerk, but, based on what you're saying here, maybe the way it looks to him is such and such. And I don't even remember what, alternative to his jerkiness I offered, but both times after hearing, from a man's point of view, what might be going on here, both times they said, oh my God, I never thought of that. So I thought, wow, that was so obvious, and they didn't see that. Something's wrong here. And probably the problem was on both ends, the man's side and the woman's side. Women have their ideas of the way things are, and men have our ideas too, but we don't really express them very well, right? So I figured, okay, I like to talk, and I like to ask questions, so I'm going to start a radio show. So that's what I did. And ever since then, it's just been an endless fascination to me, how the male point of view is just not even considered, poorly understood. We get stereotyped, and there's all this male bashing, and we don't even stand up for ourselves. We just say, yeah, you're right, we're dogs, that kind of thing. And one other aspect of this that's really important, though, is that the show started out as sort of a Phil Donahue thing. Let's have nice relationships. Can't we all love each other, men and women, all that stuff. But it became really clear really fast that there are a lot of important social issues involved in the fact that the male point of view is just not very well understood, that our wants and our needs and our desires and our strengths and our weaknesses are not very well taken into account. And a lot of social problems happen because of garbage in, garbage out. And
Yeah.
the garbage in is men have all the power.
Yeah.
And so what's the garbage we get out? Well, men don't have any problems. Let's beat up on them. Let's hold them at gunpoint and shake them down for what they have. Let's not ask them what they need, what they want, how they feel about what's going on between men and women. So, serious social problems. I mean, take a look at who's in jail. Men die 5, 6 years younger. Take a look at who's committing suicide. Take a look at young men. They're committing suicide 4 times more often than young young women. It's just not good. And we really need to get over this idea that here's one of the things that I like to say. The most, if we're in a society that frowns upon sexism, and that's fine with me. That's more than fine with me. What I like to say to sort of get things off, to start the conversation, if I want to have a good time with people who aren't quite sure where I'm coming from, I say the most sexist idea of all is that only men are sexist and only women are ever harmed by sexism. And, depending on your audience, you can be off to the races right there. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
some women will say, well, you're saying women are sexist? Yeah, sometimes you are, and sometimes we're not. And sometimes you're hurt by sexism, but so are we. And another thing that can get you going onto an energetic conversation is to say, men aren't perfect, um, but we're great. Women are great, but they're not perfect. And I've actually had some women say, name one thing we do that's wrong, ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just, it's
One
just crazy.
particular phrase that I hear a lot that I'm 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 torn between what the definition is and what people think the definition is of toxic masculinity. And when I hear toxic masculinity, I'm like, what the hell is toxic masculinity? Because everybody says toxic masculinity is bad until they need a toxic male.
That's pretty good. I have a few things I can say about that, about toxic masculinity, if you want to hear it.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think that the term originated in the psychological community. And actually, in the psychological community that was most interested in how to provide good counseling and psychotherapy to men. And so the psychologists came up with this idea that a lot of the ways in which boys are raised ends up hurting them as they become men. The idea that you always got to be strong and always got to be in control and you always got to be a tough guy and, all of that stuff that, applies to a lot of men and boys in a lot of ways, not 100%, but, these things can get in the way. If a kid is really feeling sad, really feeling bad, really feeling confused, and he doesn't think he can talk about it, that's bad for him.
Yeah.
It's sort of a poison for him. It hurts him. And so the psychologist came up with this term, this is toxic masculinity. They didn't mean to say all masculinity is toxic. They talked about a particular set of behaviors that can be toxic. So that wasn't so bad, but because our friends on the other side of the gender divide, sometimes, some of them sometimes really enjoy doing everything they can to make us look bad. They took that phrase and applied it to men and masculinity in general. And so they have a lot of time, a lot of fun talking about toxic masculinity anytime men do anything they either don't like or don't even understand.
Yeah.
Right. So it has been turned into a pejorative term. It has been turned into a term that really is intended to demean men and shame us and shame our male culture. But it didn't start out that way. The psychologists get blamed a lot for it, but I think they were trying to help, genuinely trying to help men and boys with, their emotional issues.
I think
But
communication is a big issue that they probably should have worked on, is teaching men how to communicate with each other. That's pretty impactful, I think, and where that male toxic masculinity comes from is, and there are some things that we do to raise up our boys that is actually more harmful than good. Like, stuff those feelings down. Men don't talk about feelings, this, that, and well, and we all know what I'm talking about when we say stuff those feelings down and men don't talk about their feelings. That's absolutely not true. I mean, me and my friends, when we're sitting around talking to each other, some of the best times that we have are talking about our feelings, not only for one another but for other people outside of our group. And I think you're right that genuinely the psychotherapist and the therapist in the field were trying to help, but they introduced that that phrase to the wrong group, and the wrong group they weaponized it, and it did turn into male bad, feminine male good. And I think that's where we're at a crossroads here in 2025. I've got young kids of my own, young boys, and one is 20 years old, and he comes to me and he says, Dad, it's just not fair for guys out there. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I'm everywhere I turn, I'm at a disadvantage because I'm a guy. I was taught to, that America is a meritocracy, and he's finding out quickly that in social situations and even in the workplace, it's become identity based, and and based on which side of the aisle you fall on determines how successful you're going to be, how quickly. And he feels massively at a disadvantage because he's a white male in his 20s.
How free does he talk about, how freely does he feel he can talk about those issues with anybody besides his father?
He, as a matter of fact, that was a topic of conversation the other day. He doesn't feel like he can talk to anyone, um, even in his age group, uh, without asking how they feel about certain social issues for first. But so he sent me a text message the other day. I can't remember exactly what the text message said, but he asked me how I felt about a certain social uh, issue. And I told him how I felt. And then he texted me back, okay, good. Cause I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page before I talked about this. And I said, well, where did you learn that? Why do you think that you have to do those things? And he says in social situations, sometimes it helps to know how the other person feels about social subjects before he talks about anything with them. That way they don't get crossed and have an argument.
Yeah, because it's an argument he's very likely to lose because the other side has some really good rhetoric.
And that's
And
what it is rhetoric.
it's rhetoric, and it's also the ability to shame men. Oh, you're the oppressors. You've been in charge for 5 million years, and you've oppressed women. Um, so people like to look at the top of the hierarchy that men are in, and they look up at the Fortune 500 companies and they say, look at all those men and those CEO suites up there. It's not fair. Well, they look at the Fortune 500 at the top. They don't look at the misfortune 5 million at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
But Ricky, I want to say one thing. You mentioned white males, and I get it. I do not dispute it. However, I have sort of I don't know, I have some experiences in my city of Baltimore, which is a majority Black city. I worked in the jail. I was a parole and probation agent, and I worked for National Fatherhood Initiative, teaching correctional institutions around the country how to run the Inside Out Dad program for incarcerated fathers. Now, Black men are way overrepresented in prisons. And so, I hope you won't disagree with me, but if you do, that's okay. Black men get a double whammy. you ain't no good because you're black,
You're
and
no
oh
good
yeah,
because
you
you're a
ain't no
man.
good because you're a man. Right.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a column once that ended by saying, racism knocks black men down, sexism comes along to kick them.
Yeah. Yeah. I could certainly agree with that. And that's actually a fantastic thing that you feel like you can actually, well, have a discussion with someone and not, and have an agreement or disagreement, but that doesn't matter because we're still going to continue the conversation either way. I think that's fantastic that you're like that. Just to give you a shout out there, it's very impressive that even if we do disagree on that point, and which we don't, even if we did disagree, we can still continue this conversation because that's what this podcast is all about, is continuing the conversation. We don't have to sling insults at each other if we disagree. We don't have to, we can just agree to disagree. And if I don't have an articulate argument against what you're saying, I'll say, well, I disagree. However, I don't have an articulate argument that I can present to you. It's simple as that.
It really is. And that maintains your integrity. You just say, look, I don't have any words for why I disagree with you, but I do. And, maybe I'll come up with some words and we can talk about it later. But for right now, let's talk about what we can agree on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that men are underrepresented everywhere. And I don't know if it's because we're quiet. Those moments where we disagree vehemently, whether we're just quiet about it, or if it's due to, like, self-censorship has gotten ridiculous over the years. How we feel, even if we disagree, we cannot speak up and say something else will be chastised or canceled, cancel culture. And that's where I just don't care. Right now we're in a conversation. This is me talking to you, and other people just happen to get to listen. And I really don't focus too much on the things that I say that get me in trouble anymore. But when I first started this thing, I self-censored like a son of a bitch, just to get out of the gate and try something. And then the more I learned and the more I did, I was like, I'm not going to self-censor anymore because it doesn't matter that much. This is just a conversation. And if they hold me again, to my word over just a conversation, regardless of how I may feel about that topic, it's taken out of context anyway.
You'll end up in a YouTube short, some
Yeah,
6-second thing you said that's way out of context and makes you look like a crazy man.
exactly.
Yeah, I know. That certainly happens. Ricky,
So
I
in
want
yours,
to,
go ahead.
well, I just wanted to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
I listened to the really great podcast you did with Exane uh, Alex
And
Alexander
ex, ex, I believe,
Anderson, Exane
yeah, there we
Anderson,
go. Yeah,
Exane Anderson. Just before Christmas, I think you published it on December 20th,
yeah.
and that was a great conversation. I
Thank you.
really liked it. I liked both of you guys. Um, you said during that conversation that this must have been an exaggeration, that you had a very difficult job and you eventually got to weigh 500 pounds.
Yes.
That is an exaggeration.
No, no, I was 520 pounds at my heaviest.
What was the dangerous job you were doing, or the exhausting job you were doing?
Well, so I was actually a heavy equipment operator for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was a machine operator in manufacturing factories, factory type setting. And so I was constantly moving, between uh, I was always on the go. When manufacturing, you are constantly moving. It's repetitive action, heavy action sometimes, and heat. Oh my goodness, is it hot in those factories? But so I was constantly moving around, and I was comfortable with the weight that I was at that time. I was around 200, 220 pounds. And then I got into a job where I was operating a horizontal directional drill, which is a piece of heavy equipment, but you don't move. It's very sedentary. And I was eating and drinking all day long, but not moving. And I did that for about 8 years on the road. So all the food that I had at at my disposal was not healthy. It was truck stop food, McDonald's, stuff like that. And after about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, I started noticing that I was just getting heavier and heavier and heavier, and I didn't have any energy to work it off even on the weekends. And so I was about 350, 400 pounds. And then my body started breaking down to where I couldn't walk real good. I couldn't bend. My back was hurting all the time. And then I lost that job in January 2013. And I sat around and got bigger and heavier, and just I felt like I was sitting around waiting to die, to be honest with you. And I was about 520 pounds at my heaviest. And I went in to have weight loss surgery in, I believe, August of 2021. And at that time, like I said, I felt like I was sitting around waiting to die. My skin color was yellow. My eyes were yellow. Um, I was very, very unhealthy. I couldn't stand up and go to the bathroom properly, even. And to wipe my butt, I had to make some real interesting moves in the bathroom. And showering was just exhausting, but I did it every day. And then once I had that weight loss surgery, the just weight just fell off, and I was able to get up and move around. And I'm about 260 pounds right now, but at my the most weight I lost 300 pounds total, gained some of that back. But now I'm able to get up and move around. I'm able to get up and work. I'm able to take care of my kids. I'm able to run. And actually, I can actually run now. And so, I, to tell you honestly, I don't know how I had ever convinced myself that it was okay to get that big. But I did get that big. And once I got that big, it was nearly impossible for me to get all that weight off on my own. And so the weight loss surgery absolutely helped, but it wasn't easy. I still had to work. I was basically starving myself for a little while. And once I got down to about 400 pounds, I was able to start walking and get that weight off. And now I can actually work out and do full exercises. And I feel great. I feel better now than I did in my 20s.
For you. Good for you. Was it bariatric surgery?
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually supposed to have what's called a duodenal switch. And basically, it's a combination between a gastric sleeve and a gastric bypass. And those two surgeries combined together. And I was supposed to have that, but they were only able to do one portion of it, which was the gastric sleeve, because my liver was so enlarged that they couldn't get in there and do the work that they needed to do. So they told me to come back in about 6 months, and they'd continue the surgery. And about 6 months later, I went in there and they were like, well, no, I don't think you need the surgery now. So you're doing very well. You're doing a lot better than what we thought you would do. And we want to continue on without the surgery. And I was like, great. That's great
Wow.
news to me. So,
That's so
yeah.
great. That's so great. And another, I don't want to bore your audience. If you've told this story a million times,
No, actually, go
I
ahead,
don't,
because I don't think we've actually got into it deep on this podcast
well,
before.
I want to ask another question that you might have talked about a lot. So you were really big and you lost your job and you didn't really like your job and you started just for a few days, you thought, um, taking over the duties at home, and your wife uh, went to school,
Yeah.
and you figured that it made more sense because of her earning potential with what she was going to be doing, that she would go out and make the money, and you would stay home at least for a little while. But it's turned into 11 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Okay, so And you say that the 11 years are the most the best thing you've ever done, and you're good at it, and you weren't good at the other stuff. Can
Absolutely.
you tell me how the conversations went with your wife? Because I think that's so much the template for a happy future. Because there are probably a lot of men like you and like me who had to be out working but didn't really want to be working. Just would much rather be, you know, with the kids, playing with the kids, teaching the kids, disciplining the kids in a healthy, nice, gentle, affirming way. And there are plenty of women who like being mothers, but they don't want to do it full time, and they want to be a lawyer or something. What does your wife do?
So my wife's in management. I guess we could say like HR, human resources.
Okay.
That's she when she went to school, she got her business management degree. So with a concentration in human resources. And so those conversations actually went a lot easier than what you would think. Um, it was pretty much when I got fired from my job, it was a big deal because so as a man, I feel like I was supposed to be the provider. I was supposed to bring home the money and take care of everyone financially, and that's what men do. Well, that's kind of that's kind of essentially what men do because we don't know how to be providers in any other way, in any other capacity. And I think society really didn't shift with the male provider post World War II. You know, when women joined the workforce after World War II, there was a lot of uh, development for women where men, we never really developed any more than what, you know, society told us we had to. So I was still stuck in that mindset of being a guy, being a man meant I had to go to work and be a provider financially. And it turns out that I was never really good at that. I was never really good at making money. And my wife and the conversation really kind of came about because I was burnt out. I just didn't think that I could work anymore at that moment because my boss, I'd spent the last 8 years watching him build $1 million mansion off of my efforts and then telling me I was worthless, you know, telling me I wasn't worth the time or the energy to train me up, or I wasn't worth what this guy over here was worth. And so it kind of broke my spirit a little bit. And I think she understood that. I think she saw that. And I think she saw an opportunity as well to be like, well, you know, I see a need that our family is in need, and I'm going to go fill that need. And so when we had discussed her going back to school, it was kind of like a no-brainer, and that was just the next move that made logical sense. And then I can always go out and get a job if I have to. And that's essentially what it would have been. It was a job. I was never a career guy. I am now, but I credit uh, I credit medicine for that, and we can get into that if you want to. But I uh, I felt like I was never going to have a career past like a laborer or a manufacturing job type of career, and I didn't want it. I just didn't want it, and I had no ambition. I had no real reason to go out and get a career because that's what my wife wanted, and we both couldn't have it at the same time. So her being supportive of me not wanting that and me being supportive of what she wanted, it just made a great combination. It just worked out well.
Wouldn't it be great if that model that you have adopted were free to be applied to all of the other couples for whom it would work so well if they could only get, beyond the gender-based expectations of, she needs to be at home with the kids. If she really loves her kids, she wants to be with them all the time. She wants to cook and clean and take care of the house. And you, on the other hand, well, you're the man, so you got to be out there with this horizontal drill thing that you can't even stand, and bringing home a paycheck. I mean, how many men and women do you think? Um, there's no way you can give me a number, but do you
I
think there
heard
are
on
a
a
lot of
podcast.
people? Huh?
I heard on a podcast one time, Joe Rogan, it was, I forget who he was quoting, but he said, men live quiet lives of desperation.
That's David. Is it David Thoreau?
Yes,
Thoreau, the
I
guy who
think
wrote
that's it.
Walden Pond.
Yeah. I think the same guy, and he was talking about that, and I'm like, man, yes, I really resonated with that, and I bet there's a shit ton of men out there that live the same life, like they can't speak up because society sets these rules for us. Like we have to be the providers. We have to bring home the bacon, and that's just the way it has to be.
So suppose there is a guy out there who is listening to what you've said and looks at what you've done and what you and your wife have accomplished together, and he's thinking this that he would like to make a switch too. Um, and he's not sure that his wife would go for it, but maybe she would because he hasn't even brought it up to her because, quote unquote, we don't want to worry her, right?
Yeah.
I don't want her
Yeah.
to think I'm, not going to be making the money if I need to. What would you suggest would be a good way for a man who's thinking the roles really need to be switched here? She'd be much better making money than I would. How can he go about and raise the issue in a way
Honesty.
that doesn't cause her honesty?
I really for me, I really don't care the consequences of my honesty. If it starts a fight, it starts a fight. That's just because a conversation is difficult doesn't mean it doesn't need to be had. And I've never been one to back down from confrontation. As a matter of fact, I've been known to start arguments just for the dopamine. So it's it's one of those situations where if you feel like that you need to the roles need to be reversed, like you'd rather try the stay at home thing, if you really feel like that, not talking about it's going to cause a problem.
What do you think is the main characteristic of your wife that made her amenable and open to the switch?
I think she's a people pleaser. I
She
think
wanted to she wanted to
yes,
please you.
yeah, I think I'm really honestly, I'm not sure. I could call her into here and ask her. That's a great question. um my wife has always been just supportive of me and how I feel. Um, she hasn't, when it's not obvious to her, like that there is an issue, she can be oblivious. She can be complacent at times. But if she knows there's an issue, like if she knew that I was like when we switched roles, when I started staying at home, that conversation I think went very easy because she saw the need for somebody to be home with the children, and she also saw that she, on paper, she's always made more money than me. Um, the only way that that offset was I worked a shit ton more hours than she did. So to bring home the amount of money, the same amount of money, I had to work 20 more hours. And, it was very easy for me to logically lay those things out for her and for her to make a logic based decision. And I think that may be a, her quality, that she's able to step back and look at things logically and take emotion out of it.
When you say she's a people pleaser, that's good, but is she also pleased with the way things are?
That's a good question too. I don't think I would get an honest answer if I just asked. I think she's more of a if she was unhappy, I would know.
Okay. But there's reason to believe she is pleased as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it helped. Like I say, my wife got complacent there for a little bit. That was an issue because they're right now everybody's in school, so there really is no need for me to be home with the kids. And but if I left the house and my wife had to take care of the things that I take care of, that it would be easy for her to see that there's a need for me to be here. And I think sometimes I just have to let those things go to remind her, hey, this is what I do. But in our relationship, I mean, we've been together for 18 years, so I'm a big believer in shared consciousness, and we have communication where we don't have to talk, and we just know things about each other. And I think if she was unhappy by any means, I think I would know just by their tensions being in the house. But she doesn't really make it really known that she's unhappy about things. Like it's something that you kind of have to either ask her directly. And I don't think I'd get an honest answer if I asked her directly. You just have to feel it out. And that's a great question. I really don't know.
Well, tell me to shut up if I'm asking
Oh no,
a
no, no, no.
question that's too
I'm an open
personal.
book. I am an
Okay.
open book,
This
brother.
this might be a person. It's a pretty personal question. What did she say to you when you were 500 pounds?
Actually, that's a very easy one. She was the same size.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
we both had surgery at the same time. So,
Wow.
yeah. So she wasn't as big as I am. She weighed probably 100 pounds or so less than I did, but we were both huge, big ass people. And you wouldn't believe it by looking at me now, but like if I was a big guy, and I was a quarter of a ton, a quarter of a ton, and um, it affected us in the bedroom, obviously. Um, but it wasn't such, we just continued life. Like it's different. It's really difficult to explain how being chained in that body felt, and how much differently I feel now. Um, a ball and chain is the best way to explain it, man. I was so big that I couldn't do anything. And I think my wife she was supportive of whatever I wanted to do, whatever I needed to do. We both knew that there was a problem, but addressing that problem and getting the weight off, it was damn near impossible without the surgery. So
I
I
bet.
couldn't move. I couldn't go to the gym. Just walk into the bathroom, I get winded.
Wow. Wow. What percentage of your listeners do you think are um, fathers who are doing the traditional um, breadwinner thing, and what percentage of them are full-time fathers or stay-at-home fathers like you?
I'd say about 98% of them are the traditional go to work every day type father, and I probably less than 1% are stay at home dads.
Ah, so basically, your podcast is mostly about being a father and the importance of fathers and the importance of fatherhood.
Sort of. This is kind of a catch-all show. I have to really talk about anything that I'm interested in. I talk
Okay.
about any. I say it to people like we'll talk about subjects, topics like parenting to politics and UFOs. Like it's all over the place. And the reason for that is because I really don't have friends per se. I do have friends, but I don't spend a whole lot of time with them because they're working people. And um, I love to talk to people. I love to interact with people. And so it's coffee with bearded bad dads. So like I can, it's like a morning type coffee drinking, conversation show, and that's pretty much the audience that I go after is this the people that are at home during the day and have time to listen to a conversation about whatever comes up.
Okay. So let's take a look at that 98%. Um, these are the fellows who are doing the traditional thing. And I think we sort of have agreed that there's probably a whole lot of men in that 98% who are at least at some point during the week thinking, man, I can't stand this job. I would so much like to be home. Um, but they have a lot of misgivings about it. I mean, the first of all, they're going to be giving up some money, maybe, unless the wife is, going to be flipping and picking up the shortfall, or maybe having a terrific career and making 5 times as much money as the family has now. But another thing that would cross many men's mind is, well, I'm a man. What do I know about taking care of kids?
I don't know shit
Um,
about it either. That's a great question. So the thing I would tell them is like we all started somewhere, and that there's no such thing as a perfect dad. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. But what makes a good parent is trying. What makes a great parent is the ability to look back and say, okay, I'm not a perfect parent, but I want to try to be a better parent today than I was yesterday. And just understanding that we're all going to screw up our kids somehow, and it's about, do you really want to do you really want to be the guy that sits down and makes excuses on why you don't wouldn't make a great stay-at-home dad, or do you want to just you want to try it? Because it's very easy. The best thing about being a stay-at-home dad is just you got another shot to do it again tomorrow.
like baseball, right? Have a have a bad game, but there's another game tomorrow.
Exactly. There's 162 games a year. You know,
Yeah.
you can't be a bad baseball player all 162 games, could you?
Yeah. Nope. 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 Um, so what I really liked about the interview with you and Exane, that's his name, right? Exane
Yeah. Yeah.
Anderson, was as I listened to it, you guys had me, actually laughing out loud. And it wasn't so much that you were funny, although you were. What made me laugh out loud was that you guys were just so joyful. And a better word, I think, is you just were so empowered that you were doing something that you really liked. Exane is very much an involved father too. And you were so charged up, so happy, so empowered to be doing something that a lot of men don't have the power to do. The women's movement talked a lot about empowering women to go out into the corporations and be lawyers and doctors. I'm an empowered woman. But it occurred to me that, man, it can go in both ways. You guys just you're so you're so in the right place for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I got that from that interview as well. The thing about being a dad is it really doesn't, it doesn't take much to wake up and be a good dad. It really doesn't. And being a good mom is the same way, I'd imagine. I know I'm not a mom, nor can I never be a mom, but I just look at parenting and being a dad not as something that I have to do, but something I get to do. And I think if parents looked at it, when I wake up first thing in the morning, I do have the weight of the world on my shoulders. But when I look over at my 5-year-old and he gives me this big ear to ear smile, I mean that makes it all worth it. And there's no better job in the world than being a parent. I believe there's no better job in the world, and there's certainly no more rewarding job than being a parent, because you get to watch your job grow into something magnificent and beautiful. And and it, it is really something that we get to do, not something that we have to do. And you speak of empowered. I think that's because, you know, in 2025, it's being a dad is kind of looked at differently than it was, you know, in 2015 even. I think a lot of dads are waking up to the fact that they get to be dads, and that's a wonderful thing, and that kids are awesome, you know. And but on the other side of the coin, kids are assholes, and they're all assholes, and I don't care who knows it. But there are assholes, right? And that's the greatest thing about it, is because, you know, we get to learn every day with our kids. And it's just fantastic, man. And that's a great observation that you made about that interview. And I had a lot of fun with that, because going into that interview was just like this one. We really didn't make a plan. It was just, we know what we're two guys. We're going to talk about being dads, and that was it, you know. And with you, it was like when we started interacting, it was two guys who are into male friendly media, and just being dads and being guys, and that camaraderie there is what I like. I love about podcasting.
I'm not a dad.
You're not a dad.
I'm
That's
not a dad.
interesting.
I'm not a
That's
dad. I I missed that boat when I'm 73. I was born in 51, and things were different back then. You know, not only, well, we didn't have, you know, what you and your wife have available now. I mean, your wife is pretty well accepted in her HR job at a big corporation, probably. Um, and when I was in my prime dating years, you know, in the 70s, 80s, there weren't nearly as many women who I could make a deal with to say, hey, you can go get a great job and I can go get a great job, except they're not the traditional jobs. So
right.
I missed that boat. As close as I've gotten to being a father, and it's not that close, I know, but it was fun. It was, you know, being an uncle.
Yeah,
Um,
I love being an uncle too. But
yeah, yeah.
here's something to think about, Jack. Male friendly media is kind of, I mean, you're kind of a dad. I mean,
Well,
let's
tell me
let's
what you
be
mean. Tell me what you
so
mean.
so on the internet, right? We've got thousands upon thousands, millions of options for entertainment out there. And your specific niche of entertainment is, you are there for the guys. You're there for male friendly media. How many dudes are out there that don't have dads, that can look at you and say, well, I know this guy named Jack. He's got this great radio show, and you know, he talks, it's all about guys and being in the locker room, and enjoying that camaraderie between men, and teaching guys how to be men. Essentially, that's what a dad does, is we teach our children how to be young men and women. And so essentially, I mean, you're kind of a dad.
That's interesting. Thank you. You know, I have said in the past, since I don't have any kids of my own, I sort of think of all of them as my kids. You know,
That's
it's
very interesting.
yeah.
I've got a mentor of sorts. He doesn't know he's my mentor. I don't even know the guy, but uh, Johnny Dare. He's a radio DJ out of Kansas City, and he's been kind of a father figure for me for the last 30 years. And
Just
it's
over the
very,
year.
yeah, just over the air.
Wow.
And he doesn't even know I exist. And
Ah,
I've listened to his radio show for years, and it taught me a lot about being just a good human in general. Now you talk to him and you ask him, is he a good person? Is he a good guy? Is he a father? He would tell you absolutely not. You know, nobody should follow any advice that I have, but he's a good guy. He's a good human. And He's been on the air in Kansas City for shit since 1992. So he's got a great personality, but more than just a personality, he's just a great human being. And for him to share all of those aspects over the years that he shared with us, I mean, it's impossible that he could hide who he is.
What was your dad like?
Um, so my dad, growing up, what I remember of my dad growing up, he was very gentle with me, but my dad spent most of my life in prison. So I really didn't have much of a father figure growing up. It was just my mom. And I had a stepdad. He was an alcoholic. He's a really great guy, nice friend, nice friendly guy, but he was an alcoholic, so he wasn't very dependable. And so I kind of grew up without a male father figure in my life. And when I turned 18, my dad got out of prison. We hooked up, and I had what I would consider arrested development. So I was very childish, very, and keep in mind I was a dad at 18. Very childish, very not dependable, very I wasn't respectable even. And when I started hanging out with my dad, a lot of that changed. I needed to find out who I was and that missing piece of the puzzle, and I figured it out. And I have a relationship with my dad now, but it's kind of a different father son relationship than most. I feel like I'm beyond the father son relationship that we could have had, because I had to figure out a lot of shit on my own. And but we have a great relationship. It's not like, he comes over and watches football with me, and we have a great
It
relation.
was
Just having that relationship with him that made me grow into who I am now. And I was on probation at the time when my dad got out of jail, and we I was not doing very good, and I had a conversation with him, and he's like, son, sometimes there comes a time when you got to go along to get along. And that made a lot of sense to me. And when I went into the probation office, I went along to get along, and it worked out very well. And I can credit him for helping me understand that jail is not somewhere I wanted to be, and that you are who you hang around. If you hang around with yo-yos, you're going to be a yo-yo. And just how to be a better man in general. I didn't have any men in my life. And so between the ages of like 18 and 23, I can say that he taught me how to be a man, how to be a provider in other ways besides financially, because neither of us had money at that time. And it was more like, hey, you've got to be here for these people up here too. You got to be there for these people here, like I never was. And just having that relationship helped me grow immensely.
um, I mentioned that phrase, a hole in your heart, the shape of your father.
Yeah.
I want to give credit where credit is due. That's a phrase that I think was coined by. I know I've heard it from him. I think it was coined by Roland Warren, who was the president of National Fatherhood Initiative when I worked there for a year. And I just think it's a great saying. I mean, you knew immediately what I meant,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and I actually know a lot of those. So I have a child myself who has a hole in their heart in the shape of their father. My oldest daughter, she's 21. I didn't meet her until she was 5. So, she's got a lot of daddy issues. And one of these days we'll talk about it on the show, but I've asked her, she's 100% comfortable with me sharing our story, but I would like her to come on the show and share our story. But I
You
didn't meet
bet.
her until she was 5. So she's got a
Wow.
lot of daddy issues.
Yeah, and so she might also very well have a lot of issues with men in general.
Absolutely, she does.
Yeah,
And these and I can talk about that all day long because the issues that she has with men in general are because of her issues with her father.
no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And that's actually one of the reasons why I coffee with bearded bad dad. And I'm not a perfect dad. But I'm a dad, and that's why I'm here. I like to be. I like to say it this way. I'm trying to be a better man, husband, and father. Than a better man, husband, and father than I was yesterday. And that's what this is all about for me. This is
How about
personal
being
development.
how about being a citizen?
I really don't care about that. Because I figure if I'm good at those three, I'll be a good citizen.
Okay, but you do care about being a good citizen. I mean, as a knock-on effect of taking care of business at home, it's good
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things I talk about a lot here is, how we treat each other here at home. Absolutely, brings itself into the outside world, and how we treat our kids and how they grow up translates into how they'll behave outside of the home when they're older.
Yeah. So you think of all the kids out there in America right now and in other countries who don't have any father at all and who have heard nothing about what a bum he is. Um, how different, might our citizenry be if these kids, suddenly magically could go back in time and never lose their dads?
Man,
What do
it
you,
it would
how
be
better,
so
how
much
much better
different.
off would we be? What do you think?
I think that we wouldn't have the societal issues that we have today. That's for certain. But they'd be different ones. They would be different issues. There's never going to be a perfect place. But I believe, and now this is a little sexist. Back prior to World War II, when women entered the workforce, we were a lot happier. And I think the reason was because somebody was home taking care of the kids, and now they're not. And whether it be mom or dad, one of the two, somebody needs to be home with them damn kids. And the nuclear family, forget about fathers and forget about mothers. They need both. The kids need both mothers and fathers, and for different reasons. The maternal instinct is to love and coddle the children. The fraternal instinct is to protect the children. And without both, the both one will make you good at the other. And I think, and that goes back to being a good citizen. I think that raising up good citizens is really not that hard. Even if you live in an unhappy home, having both mom and dad in the home is a big deal. Even if they fight every day, and you still have your mom and dad, chances are you're going to have an okay life when you're older. And I can't mention that enough. Just people give up way too soon. Me and my wife have been through hell. It's not always been simple for us. As a matter of fact, just a couple weeks ago, we were going at each other like, like not physical, but we were fighting, just arguing. But at the end of the day, the kids know that we both love them and that they're going to be okay. And I think if I had a big piece of advice for any mom or dad out there is, if you have to split up, if you have to divorce, it's okay. But don't forget those kids need you. And they're not tools, they're not weapons, they're people. And they need both of their parents equally.
It sounds so right to me. So right to me. I think probably the best thing our quote unquote leaders could do in a governmental sense is to sort of change the expectations for what's going to happen in the event of divorce. And it really should be, and I think the science, the social science, and the research bears this out. It really should be that the starting point of a divorce involving kids is shared parenting. Nobody has to worry that they are going to be annihilated in terms of their relationship with their kids. You don't have to lawyer up with heavy machine guns so that your lawyer is ready to shoot the other lawyer. There's none of that. Nobody's going to die. And keeping the focus on what the kids need. And you and I can break up, but neither of us is going to break up either relationship with the kids.
Absolutely. Are you married, Jack?
Yes, I am married. Yes.
So the thing I always tell people, like the government has no business being in family matters. They really don't. And as soon as they inserted themselves in the family matters, that's when we started having trouble, you know? And when you go to a court for divorce, I think there wouldn't be as much divorce if we just taught people that they should wait to have sex or have children specifically. They should wait to have children until they're both, they find a partner that number one is worthy of having children with, but number two is also in line with the way you believe, your personal beliefs, your personal morals, that you have the same morals going forward. And that's what dating's about, really. It's supposed to be finding out if you're compatible, finding out if you believe the same way. And if we just stress that, like families first. If we let people understand, like, hey, you need to find a partner that's not only good looking. You need to find a partner that's after the same things that you're after, and talk about these things before you have kids. I think that'd go a long way.
Makes sense to me. One of the rules in my dating life toward the end there, um, probably when I was in my 40s and 50s, was I had a 90-day rule for myself. And the 90-day rule was for the first 90 days, you could do, you and the girl, the woman, you could do whatever you wanted above the belt, above the belt, nothing below the belt for 90 days. And the reason, and a caveat to the rule was nothing below the belt. And if you stand on your head, it changes to nothing above the belt. Okay. So you couldn't get around it by, standing on your head. And the reason I like the 90-day rule for myself was because I found that as soon as you had sex, something changed.
It did. It changed. Man, I've I've never really talked about it, but I've felt that as well. As soon as you have sex, the relationship changes.
We describe what happens. Do you have
What's
any
that?
words for that? How could we describe what happens, how it changes? Do you have any words for that?
Um, man, I don't have any words for it except for that is the most intimate act that one could do. And once you do that thing, there's nothing left. There's no mystery left. There's no, everything about that person essentially. And I really don't have words to explain it, but in my opinion, that's what happens. Is that's the most intimate thing that you can do together. And once that's done, there's nothing intimate there's nothing to look forward to. There's nothing to like that 90-day rule, by that 89th day, you're just, it's you're rabid, and after that 90 days happens, once it goes there, you're like, cool. And that's it. There's no more trying. There's no more playing hard to get. It's just that's it.
And you've got 89 days of other stuff that your relationship has built up, and you can carry on
And
on
you've got you've got
a solid
90 days
basis.
to 90 days to figure out, well, do you want to have kids? Yeah, I want to have kids eventually. How about you? Nah, not feeling it. Then you don't even make it to those 90 days. You already know. And then what's the point in waiting around to that 93rd day, 94th day, 95th day if you know that you're not compatible?
Sounds right to me. I should maybe I should mention some words that I could put in onto what changes with sex by virtue of the fact that I'm probably at least one generation older than you, right?
Yeah, I'm 39.
Okay, so almost two generations older than you. The reason, one of the reasons, besides all of the ones you just explained that I hadn't really even been able to put into words, but they all ring true. But the main reason that was top of my mind about why I wanted to have a 90-day rule was that back in the day when I was a young buck, um, it just seemed that, well, I think it was true that that sex was thought of as something that women give and men take. And in my era, if you had sex with a girl or a woman, you owed her. That's the way it was. You owed her. She gave you her virtue, that kind of thing. And so you were sort of like, you know, indebted, indebted to her. And if you wanted to break up, oh my God, you had to feel guilty because you had had sex with her. And I didn't like the way in which sex was sort of used as, I don't know, heavy equipment, you might say,
Yeah.
for making the chain tight. Um, so um, it I did get to some 90 days. Actually, I got to an 89 day, and I said, this is I do not want to. I'm out of here. And if I had not held on to that 89 days or held on to the 90-day rule, I would have felt, bad about leaving, but I didn't. I felt great. Like, thank God I am not indebted to this woman. And, back in my generation, it really was true for the most part that, women did not talk about how much they liked sex. Can you imagine that? Now
Yeah.
women are very honest about the fact that they like sex. But back then, no, it was something, women would talk, were advised to lie back and think of England, you know, really. You just, you can't be into it. It's not ladylike to scream and moan, with pleasure. Oh, so it was very different. It was very different two generations before you. Um, but still, I think a 90-day rule probably still would work for young men today. If and even if you don't get past, 30, it's it's good. It still helps. It still
I
helps you to keep focused on who is this woman.
Right, right. And so I've got a weird outlook on kids though, and fatherhood and motherhood and parenting. I do feel like it's very important, that we produce good citizens as children, as parents. I mean, um, I but I think of things demographically as well and politically. And as a country, we need kids. And I don't think the government cares where they come from. But that 90-day rule is that's so it's it makes me think a little bit because I've never been like that. I don't really care. It sounds good in theory, but I'm not a very good practitioner, if that makes sense. My wife and I, when we first got together, I was actually married, and I was getting a divorce, and that relationship was over. I knew it was over, but dating and my wife's very my current wife is very modest and very old school in the way she believes. And that was a problem that I was married. But I told my wife, my current wife, I was like, look, I don't want to be with her. I want to be with you. And I knew I loved my wife the day I met her. And I knew I was going to marry her. And I wouldn't have made it those 90 days with my current wife. And I think there are times, I'm a big believer where there are sometimes you just know. And my wife and I couldn't ever, when I say I couldn't have made it the 90 days, like we didn't make it even 3 days after meeting one another before we were sleeping with each other. And then 2 weeks after that, I told her I loved her. And like a month after that, I asked her to marry me. And we were together for 8 years before we actually got married. And we had already had a child together and everything before we got married. And it was like, well, this is next. So we got married. And so like I said, I couldn't be a practitioner, but I do love that 90-day rule. And I think if we did teach our kids like, hey, you got to have some respect, you got to have some boundaries, and then let's just take your 90-day rule, nothing below the belt for 90 days. And here's why. If they understood why, if they could ask that question, why, and then get an explanation that makes sense to them. I mean, it's more likely to change their mind nowadays. These kids are smart these days. They really are.
Because of all of the access they have to information and videos and
Yeah,
that
and
kind of
I
stuff.
think that's why there's, that drug use is declining. Smoking cigarettes that's declining. Uh, Teen pregnancies is on the decline, and it has been for years. So I do believe access to information and honest talking, honest conversations. I think that's what's working.
Sounds good. You're generally an optimist, I can tell.
Yeah, I am. As far as like political, the political and social land we live in these days, I'm optimistic about that as well. I think that the pendulum swings, and it swung way far over here, and now it's going to swing back over this way, and so we're in for some turbulent times, but I'm optimistic.
All right, good. Sometimes instead of seeing it being a pendulum swinging in a particular direction, I see it sort of like a crate being pushed to a cliff.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I
that's,
think.
and there's no coming back from that. And
Yeah,
so I like, I like your optimism that it's, it'll swing back. But, it does worry me that you can get to a breaking point.
I actually agree, and I think I hope that we're not at that breaking point. There's a lot of bad shit going on right now. The last few months has been really turbulent for geopolitics, and
Yes.
it's terrifying. But I hope that we're on our way to stability. I hope.
And I have to say that one of the things that gives me the most hope is what we're doing right now.
Yes.
I have so much respect for podcasting. because even when you're talking to a guest, or I'm talking to a when you're talking to a guest, or I'm talking to a host that you have some real strong disagreements with, you're looking at each other, or at least you're in real-time communication with each other, and you're just inevitably more respectful.
That's right. That's right. Social media has changed so much.
I know.
People aren't afraid to talk bad about the person that they're talking to because they can't see them.
And they're just pressing it in 140 characters at a time and going, that'll get you. And
Yeah.
it's so much like throwing hand grenades, you know?
I think it was Dr. Phil that I was listening to one time. He said that a lot of the things from that social media has done was not see us as people, not see each other as people. And if we just sit down in front of each other and we have to look at each other in the face, and while we're disagreeing, and like if you were in the same room as me, we could disagree and be okay and not come to fisticuffs. You know what I mean? We But online, if we disagree, there's no incentive to be nice to each other. There
I know
there's and
you can get more likes and more followers by being a butthead.
Yeah, or intentionally obtuse, and that happens a lot. You don't a person could understand that they are wrong and still keep going like they were not wrong because they're not staring at, they're not looking at another person. They're looking at it as a set of words on a page. And I think that's a good point. Is this podcasting thing is it's not a new idea. It's just that people are looking at it as entertainment differently than they used to. And I think it's because I'm not afraid to be honest. I'm not afraid to speak my mind. And a lot of the podcasters that I listen to are big enough where they don't, if they misspeak on something, that's exactly what it is misspeaking. If they're wrong, or they have a different opinion as someone else, that's exactly what it is. It's an opinion. It's an opinion podcast, or a true crime podcast that said something that wasn't factually correct. Well, we always have an opportunity to correct that information. We always have that opportunity. But it's just a conversation between two people, and that's how I look at it. Is there's plenty of time to correct things, and it goes down to like free speech. I'm almost a free speech absolutist. The only way to combat bad ideas is with good ones, and that's what this provides right here. Good dialogue between two people, conversation, communication, honesty. And I think that's what podcasting is all about in general, is just having a different media where people can come and just speak their mind and be honest. And whereas the media that we see on television, or mainstream media, what we call nowadays, is just 5-minute sound bites of political correctness. That's all it is. It's two people, one of them might have a grand idea, but he can't get it all out in 5 minutes. And then, on to a commercial break of four or five, you know, uh, 4 or 5 commercials of pharmaceuticals. That's the big thing nowadays. It's pharmaceutical commercials. I can't
I
watch TV for 20 minutes without seeing 10 pharmaceutical ads.
Yeah, yeah. And aren't they great where they show people being so happy and having so much fun? Meanwhile, the narrator is, giving all of these warnings, disclaimers about this can kill you, you
Yeah,
know.
Jeff Foxworthy has a great joke about that. Years ago, years and years ago, he was, I can't remember what the comedy show was, but it was a Jeff Foxworthy comedy special, I believe. And he was listing off a million different Itchy, watery eyes. It may cause anal seepage. You could lose your house. Yeah, it's 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 craziness. And I
Yeah.
was watching one the other day, and it literally all of the side effects were worse than what it was treating.
Well, somebody's making some money.
Billions.
Yeah.
Well, Jack,
Yeah.
this has been a great conversation, man. I would love to do this again sometime, but
Sure. It's
I
been
think I
fun.
got to get out of here today.
Okay. Very
I've
good.
got I've got actually so we have a side gig that we do in the evenings, and it's actually we go clean clinics together. And my wife or I go and I take the trash out and and do all that stuff. It takes me about generally an hour, hour and a half every night. And then she goes behind me and she cleans behind me. And, you know, that's our little side gig that we do to help supplement our income. So we got to
You. So you got to
get
get to
going on
that, huh?
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right,
Well,
Ricky, it's been really fun. Really
I
fun talking with
appreciate
you.
it, Jack. It has been really fun. Like I said, we're going to have to get together and do this again sometime because we've covered all kinds of topics, and I just I love these conversations where even if we did disagree, you know, we could still have a great conversation, and that I love that, and that's I mean that's what we do this for.
Yeah. Terrific. All right. Thank you,
Uh,
Ricky.
no problem. We'll see you later.
Okay. Take care.
Woo!